My presentation is the Youth Blueprint, where I researched the impact of standardized testing on academic equity. And before I start, I'd like to thank my mentor, Mian, who gave me valuable expertise on the field of public policy and law. So a little bit about me, I'm Rabani Chadha. I'm based in Irvine, California, and I started the Youth Blueprint, which is an initiative dedicated to empowering and educating teenagers on how to engage in policymaking. I did my research paper and I furthered my research paper with a website, and I addressed the academic disparities and also Civics 101 on my website. And jumping into the socioeconomic disparities, research from College Board and the National Center of Education Statistics shows a direct correlation between family income and SAT scores. Are more likely to take the SAT and ACT. I know this might sound like common sense, but quantifying this in a way where we can see the numbers in the data shows to the extent that these children in marginalized communities are being affected. And approximately 17% of students from high-income families score 1,300 or higher. And this is completely contrasting with the 2.5% of low-income students who barely try and achieve this score. There are multiple factors that go into the test preparation that give the result. Resources and lots of other resources. And we can see with the graph here, the percentiles ranking with the scores of the 1,300 or higher given by parent income ranks. And this ties into my next slide of the funding disparities on how these marginalized communities are being affected by their schools and infrastructures. One thing I'd like to point out is the districts serving Black, Latino, or Native American students receive around $1,800 less per student than those serving the fewest students of color. Limited support for low-income students, underprivileged students often rely on underfunded schools with minimal test prep resources that makes it way difficult to compete with their wealthier peers. I personally have visited marginalized communities in my area and seen that they don't have access to Chromebooks. For example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, they weren't given equal access to Chromebooks, books, and other textbooks that normally me in my school I was given access to. So it kind of highlights the consequences they have just by living there. And I would also like to point out the racial discrimination that these students get. Majority of the Black, Latino, or Indigenous students in areas are in schools that are disproportionately underfunded. Amongst 77% of these schools fail to offer a full coursework such as AP and IB curriculums. And what this does as a whole is it limits opportunities for college admissions and school uplifting, like schools getting awards and things like that. And this is especially really important because the Supreme Court banned affirmative action. So these students do need another boon into college, getting degrees. And under the Trump administration, the federal oversight of education policy is being hindered. So we need to bring this to light more and show that these marginalized communities and their schools are being disproportionately underfunded and are not able to go to college and get the degrees that they deserve. So this is a graph that quantifies the darker blue is the African Americans and the lighter blue is the Latinos. And as we go up to the math scores, which is the highest, is around a 700. Sorry. We can see that that bar significantly decreases. And this is pulled from the College Board SAT percentile ranks. And we can see that, these tests claim to be objective, but they're designed in a system that was historically excluding marginalized voices. The SAT was once used to sort students into elite universities, and that legacy still shows today. And my research really brings the exams that are distributed by state, such as SBAC and STAR, are definitely excluding people from different communities. And I know those are some of the problems I stated, but these are some recent policy reforms on standardized testing, such as the decline in high stakes testing. I know many of you guys have seen that many schools are going test optional, but since 2025 and 2026, a lot of schools are bringing it back. And, this shift shows the concerns of a racial bias, and the testing reinforces the achievement gap. Another cause for policy reforms is advocacy reforms. Fair Test Organization is one of the biggest organizations that advocates for equitable testing practices, and opt-out movements is where parents and students purposely opt out of these standardized. As of 2023, approximately 83% of four-year colleges have adopted test optional or test blind admissions, and this number is slowly increasing, but we can see that the majority of them still are test optional, because this means colleges do recognize that there is an academic disparity presented by the standardized testing. And in my website that I created, I tie in a lot of elements of educational policy and law. And while I was making some of the tabs of, committees and like the legislative process, I was wondering, what are some of the important questions that committees consider in education policy? And one of the biggest questions was, will this policy reduce disparities in education or marginalized communities? And they also consider the. And this is a shift because in the past years, the Supreme Court and other courts wouldn't take into account the stakeholder testimony. And as we are, going in these college admission processes and schools are bringing it back, the educational policies and bills are under more comprehensive review that bring in more students and parents in committee hearings, and they get more input from these political and non-governmental organizations, such as I said, the Fair Test Movement and the Opt-out Organization. And in my, I know this presentation is just a brief and a general overview of my research, but the Youth Blueprint's main goal is to empower teenagers to engage with the legislative system and advocate for educational equity. On my website, there's everything from the basics of legislation to my specific research topic and how students can stay updated on current news and policies, and also how to stay engaged in discussions. So one thing I would like everyone to do is maybe pull out your phones or even use your computer to put the link in and scan the QR code so you can go onto my website and see the research I did, and also how you can stay engaged as a student in the current educational policies that are being made, and also what you can do to help support marginalized communities around you. Thank you so much.
Great job. I'm looking at your website now. So what are your next steps for you? What do you want? Where do you want to go with your research?
Definitely my next steps would be, I'm currently filing for a 501c3 where I have a team who I've definitely, talked about this issue with, and they all agree with me. And I also am working on expanding the website, and I'm currently visiting marginalized communities near me. I live in like a place where some people call the bubble. So it's good to go outside of the bubble and go to these communities that have disproportionately affected schools and kind of look at them, hear their experiences, and also create a platform where people can donate and schools can get funding for things such as Chromebooks, textbooks, and equal access for all.
That's really great. And what was the most surprising thing that you learned through your research?
The most surprising thing that I learned from my research was actually something very personal to me. While I was doing research, I found these communities in these marginalized areas where they're right next to me. You expect to do research where in a different part of the US that this is happening, or you don't think that it's in your area, right? So, and one of the communities that I researched on my website is around 20 minutes away from me, which is not far. And seeing that this disproportionate funding and these impact of the standardized test scores on their schools is so real. It just brought to light that I need to say something about this issue. And also educating people about the legislative system. I know that a lot of kids my age just don't watch news. They think it's boring. So that's something I wanted to highlight in my website, of a fun way where you can know the process of the legislative system, exactly how an educational bill goes into law, and also how we as students can come up with educational bills. Because a lot of people are scared of, going out there and saying something. But I think that that's what we need to, because we are the next generation. We need that to, uplift our student voices.
I completely agree with you. I think that you can start making an impact in high school and even before. So that's really great.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.